Welcome back to the Eve approach, and last time we sent our crew to Eve and brought them back, and also in the same launch window we sent a communication system, a big communication system. This is not it, by the way, this is part of it. So I'm actually going to do some building to start with in most episodes so you can see what I'm doing, and what we're actually doing here is I'm trying to put together a pretty compact squat, I think would be the phrase, squat, communication system. So we've got that big dish on the top, and that will give us a nice signal to Eve, and then we're going to put this fuel tank in there and the engine, and this is one of the smallest fuel tanks I could actually get, and I quite like it because it looks quite good. So that's going to be one of our communication system. We're going to use a few of them, and it's got some extra little antenna we're sticking on there. They don't really need to be there, but I just thought, you know what, probably looks better and gives us a little bit of extra range and things like that. So that's our first communications thing, and the second one we're going to adapt that. We're going to take it. We're going to do some stuff with it. There we go. We don't need the big solar panels. We've put a shorter range communicator on because once we've got signal to Eve, we just need to bounce it around a bit. And we're going to put some solar panels on there. That should be enough. Nice big batteries, lovely. I did think about putting 2 sets of solar panels on this, and then I thought that's just excessive. Let's just stick to one. I think it just looks better, doesn't it? Yeah. What that? No. Yeah. Just stick to one, sea monsters. That's better. Much better. Nice and compact. We just need a nice compact craft, and you can see compact is the need for this because yeah, we're going to use our launcher from the last episode, and we're going to try and stack them on it. Now I could just stack them on top of each other. I've done that before with the built-in fairing sort of payload sort of stacking, but that always tends to lead to me having solar panel or antenna issues. So I have decided that we're going to build them the way I used to build these things. So we've got 4 of the big ones there on this sort of stalk, and then what we're actually going to do is, yeah, we're going to put some more bits on, and we're going to slap a couple of the little ones on as well, and they'll just sit in there. And the advantage of the little ones is we actually have to have a space where the fairing comes out from the body and then comes back in again. So by doing this, I actually give myself basically that spacer, and we're just compacting them in a little bit. There we go, and rotate them there, and we're done. And then we can just put our fairing over the top, and of course we have to put some struts on, don't we? We've got to strut this up a bit. Struts are key. I know you can auto strut, and I know auto strut's a thing, but yeah, I'm a traditionalist. I like my actual struts, and also I think it's actually not a bad habit to get to actually have real struts there, particularly if you're going to have engineers around at any point, because depending on how you position them, it gives you free struts that you don't have to transport any other way. Anyway, there we go. We're going to put our fairing cover on there, and it's going to be pretty much the same launch vehicle that we used for our crewed launch, and then we're ready to go. Sort the staging out, off we go. Night launch for this one. And one thing I do notice about this craft, it does have a little tiny flex in it, and I think I could probably fix that by putting a little bit of struttage inside those fairing sections for the 2nd and 3rd stage sort of interstages. I think that would probably help it a little bit, but we'll think about that. I might do that for future flights. So this was actually our second launch of this vehicle, this launch vehicle, not the upper stage, obviously. My aim, however, was to have this get to Eve first, because having communications is vital. If I want to send anything other than crewed missions there, then I definitely need to have good communications, and yeah, so that's the thing. Interestingly, I have got that panel on the bottom of the 3rd stage to communicate with Kerbin, and then I realized that's really stupid, but you know what, I quite like keeping this craft the same. So there we go, that's on its way. And this one does its burn just like the crewed one in the last episode. We're using those two-part engines on the bottom there to do the initial burn, but it does have to wait a bit in orbit to get to the right point to actually do its burn, which is a little bit annoying at times for you know, having to wait around. Again, we're gonna do all of these things as much as we can. There we go. The notification comes up. One thing I will say about the alarm clock notification, if it's based on a maneuver node, it will activate 1 minute before the time it suggests you start your burn, and I really like that. I like the fact that you've always got 1 minute, so you can do your orientation, things like that. It's consistent. I really like that. So we fire off our burn, and this craft, however, is not going to make it perfectly to Eve as is. So we have to get rid of that 2nd stage, obviously, because we use the fuel up. But a lot of the craft, we had to do mid-course changes on, because Eve is inclined, and so you may want to do some mid-course corrections, and often that happens in interplanetary space. You can do some sort of burns around Kerbin to try and counteract things, but in general the easiest burn is mid-course. And so there we go, we're just looking at the craft and having a look and saying, oh, you know, actually it is going to be okay. We are actually going to be able to get to Eve reasonably easily, and we do a little bit of burning, and yeah, it's on course. So off we go, and yeah, after you know, almost a year in orbit, we are approaching Eve. We get into the sphere of influence, and we are coming in a possibly the worst position for a communication system, unless you're going to put it into polar orbit. And in reality, I could have actually just put this into polar orbit, and there was some debate in my mind as to possibilities, and I'll come onto those when we're actually setting the system up. I did consider putting these things into polar orbit, but in the end we don't. So we want to basically capture, but what I did was, as soon as you get into the sphere of influence, you can do some plane change burns, and they're a little cheaper. So what I did was I did some plane changing a little bit, put it into the correct orientation, so that it's going in what I call my standard orientation around the planet, that anti-clockwise around the planet. And then also brought my periaps down a little bit so that our capture burn was going to be more efficient, because I was aware of fuel requirements. That was something I was aware of, because I need to get certain maneuvers done with the upper stage as is, and there's certain points when you've got a multi-part load like we have here. If I start to get rid of one or two probes, it can throw the weight off, and it makes it very difficult to do future burns. So I was very aware of that. So we do all that there, and then it's the capture burn time, and it's not the tightest capture in the world that I've gone for, but it does help us a little bit with our capture burn. So it's not the most expensive in the world, but it's not too bad. And you can see we've still got a little bit of an inclination. Probably we can tidy that up once we're actually captured, because of the way I've done the burn, we actually should be coming in, you know, so that our inclination change is a little bit cheaper. Actually, it's going to be a little cheaper than it would have been if we tried to get it perfect straight off the bat. So there we are, we're in the normal, and then it's just a case of, right, let's get this inclination sorted. So I'm sure there's a way of showing where your normal and anti-normal nodes are, but the way I tend to do it is I basically do a normal or anti-normal burn and measure the change in the inclination on the bottom left there. And then you can move the actual node forwards and backwards, and that will go up or down. If the inclination goes down, you're going in the right direction to get to the equator, as it were. And then you just keep doing that. You keep doing, you know, normal, anti-normal burns and moving the node around it, and only normal and anti-normal burns until you get it to as low as possible, and then you can start doing your other things as well. And you know you're actually at the ascending or descending node there. And that's a way of figuring out without those nodes being visible. It'd be nice if you could actually see them when you're orbiting a planet. I'm sure there must be a way of doing it, and if you know how to do it, please do tell me. But I don't know if it's like setting the planet as a target. I don't know. It's just one of those things that annoys me a little bit. So there we go. We do our plane change burn. It's got a little bit of a change for prograde retrograde as prograde retrograde as well, because what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to bring our apoapsis down to a certain altitude, because what I want to do is I want to put the 4 big dishes into equatorial orbits that are geostationary or evostationary. Would it be evostationary? And I actually had to check this because I was concerned that we would actually have an interaction with Gilly, but Gilly is so small, and its gravitational, its sphere of influence is so small, it's not really going to be a big issue. If we were using n-body physics, yes it would be, but we're not, so I'm not too bad. So what I'm actually doing is setting it up into an orbit that is greater than evostationary, I suppose we should call it, because what we'll do is we'll put it in a not circular orbit. We want our periaps to be at our preferred altitude for the circular orbit. So we're going to bring that to that there. And if you want to get these actual numbers, the easiest way to do it is to go on to a website that will actually tell you. And if you do Kerbal and satellite constellation or resonance, you will be able to find it. If you really want to know, please you know, put a comment down below, and I'll send you I'll put the link up and then pin it if people really want that. It's something I think is really useful to have. The alternative is what we could do and we do later on, but I'll explain that to you. So yeah, so this first craft is released, and then at its periapse it's going to retrograde burn, which will bring down its apoapsis, and then it should circularize it. And at that point, what I tend to do is note down the actual orbital period. The orbital period is key here. I don't go for the periapse and apoapse for my subsequent flights, but now I know this one is pretty circular. I'm going to be looking at that orbital period when I do my other burns, my other 3 burns. And so this one will just sit in orbit like that, facing Eve, and we'll move on to our next one. So we just move across the craft, get a bit of black screen, there we go. Decouple the next one, put out its solar panels, get all of its antenna out, and we're going to whiz forward, thank you very much, whiz forward to the next node. There we go. So we're going back to our periapse again. We're going to do the same burn, and because of the fact we've got it in this orbit, we know that there's a time difference between the 2 orbits. Once we do this burn should be about 20% less orbital period than the original orbit, and that means that our craft will be spread out, or 25%, will be spread out equally around the orbit, 1 every 90 degrees. And that's the way you can do it. You can actually, if you go online, you can type in how many satellites, and it'll tell you this is the orbit you need to be in. You'd release them at this point, you do this burn, and then that's what you get. And again, for all of these craft now, all I'm doing is I'm actually looking at that orbital period, and I'm making sure the orbital period is the same. I don't care about the apoapse and the periapse. It is the orbital period that's key, because I want them to stay the same distance apart. And Eve should be okay for that, because this is quite a high orbit for Evo stationary. And there we go, the final craft is being released, and that's that done. So that will be our outer ring of communication. That will give us communication to Kerbin. It will give us communication to Eve and to Gilly, or most of Gilly. Of course, Gilly, at times there will be bits of Gilly that are on the far side of our dishes, but that will be very limited, because we've got such high orbits that we will always have probably 2 or 3 satellites able to communicate with Gilly, and we will really narrow down the area on the back of Gilly that you can't get signal to. And we could fix that with more craft. So next, we have 4 more communications satellites, and I did debate this. I did debate, should we send them and put them around Gilly, but I don't really feel the need to do that. And then I thought, should I put them in a polar orbit so I can cover the poles? And I was tempted to do that, and we do have, I believe, the Delta V. We had the Delta V to do that. But I decided, actually, we're going to do most of our landing equatorially, and I'm concerned that some of our craft equatorially will not have the range to actually get a signal out to those far satellites. So I want to put a nice close ring in. So if you don't want to use the apps or whatever, what you can do is you can put your craft into the orbit you want it to be in. Look at the time of that orbital period, and then burn prograde until the new orbital period is 25% higher. I think it's 25%. I think it's 25% higher than the original orbit. Then you start releasing your satellites, and you circularize them at their periapse, and they will be spaced out 90 degrees apart, just like we are doing here. And it's actually a nice, simple little process to go through. And you can just jump backwards and forwards. And this one didn't take much time at all. And now we have them deployed. So the idea is we have that outer ring that allows big scale communication, you know, between planets, and we have this inner ring that's going to be our Eve communication for those craft that are near Eve, or even on the surface if we can get some stuff down there, stuff that's coming back up. And all of this combined can help communicate with Gilly as well. So that's what we're basically trying to do. We're trying to make sure we've got communication coverage. The poles, because of angles and things like that, I don't think this close set of satellites are going to have brilliant signal for the poles in certain places. But we do have those Evo stationary craft that will cover the poles if need be. And if I have to send some more stuff up and just scatter the sort of high inclinations, we could do that. We could put the equivalent of like a GPS system up there if we really needed to, or even like the Starlink system that's going up. So there we go. So there's our satellites, all in orbit, all communicating, all wonderful, and we've got lots of communication. So what are we going to do next? Well, before the next episode, what I actually want to do is get rid of some rubbish. Yeah, that's right. The carrier craft here, it needs to go bye-bye. And so I basically set it to deorbit. We fire its engines, and we're going to have it fire through the atmosphere of Eve, and I was expecting it to explode in a fiery ball of death and destruction. And it sort of did that. Well, we lost the engines, and we lost the fuel tank, and we lost most of the bottom end, but it seems that the fairing base is exceedingly good as an air brake, which is something I need to take into consideration. So yeah, next episode we're actually going to get some more science, but as our rubbish descends onto Eve, I can't believe this is the first thing we're going to land on Eve. It's actually embarrassing. As this descends onto Eve, from me, until next time, have a great one.